All right, let's just dive right into this explainer because we need to unpack a geopolitical crisis that is escalating incredibly fast for 2026. We're literally looking at a situation where decades of established European military architecture could just vanish over the course of a few days. The foundation of European security is at risk, and by extension, global stability.
To really understand how we got here, we have to rewind to the 72-hour window right after the US president ordered 5,000 troops out of Germany. He essentially put Rome and Madrid on notice regarding a potential withdrawal with three incredibly stark words. Yeah, probably. And the source material points out that he specifically called out a lack of help from Italy and flat out called Spain's actions horrible.
And to grasp the true stakes of those words, you just need to look at this number right here, 12,662. That is the exact, literal count of active-duty Americans stationed across Italian military installations as of December 2025. We're not talking about a tiny advisory force here, folks. We are talking about the absolute southern shield of NATO.
So, for this explainer, we're going to break this crisis down into 6 parts: the withdrawal threat, the 3 diplomatic triggers, the Mediterranean vulnerability, Italy's defense deficit, the broader NATO shift, and finally, the ticking clock.
Section 1. The withdrawal threat, a Rome problem. Let's see how a standard Pentagon force posture review suddenly morphed into an absolute crisis for Italy.
Right, so the core of this tension, it really comes down to a deep feeling of abandonment in Washington. As one official framed it, we helped them with Ukraine, but when we needed them, they were not there. So Washington isn't framing this potential eviction of American troops as some kind of bullying tactic. Instead, it's being viewed as a calculated realignment based on a perceived lack of reciprocal support.
Which brings us to Section 2, 3 diplomatic triggers, Rome's pivot. Let's look at exactly how that historic relationship fractured. You see, this relationship didn't just break overnight. It was a rapid-fire succession of events over a single spring. Boom, March 2026. Italy refuses landing rights for U.S. bombers at the Sigonella Air Base, citing paperwork issues. Then, early April, Rome suspends its automatic defense cooperation agreement with Israel right in the middle of the Iran war. And then, mid-April, things just absolutely explode publicly when Prime Minister Meloni and President Trump clash directly over the new American-born Pope's calls to end the Iran war. Meloni basically summarized her government's position with this statement: "When there are things we don't agree with, we act accordingly." By siding with the pontiff and against the U.S. approach to the Iran conflict, the source explains that Italy effectively alienated its biggest security protector. This sentence was everywhere in the Italian press, and it completely shocked the U.S. National Security Council. I mean, this was a massive shift from one of Europe's historically most pro-American leaders.
Section 3. The Mediterranean vulnerability, a two-front risk. Here's where the timing becomes, well, incredibly problematic.
The crucial takeaway here is that while Rome was taking this moral and political stand, the physical map of the Mediterranean was getting highly dangerous. Just look at what Italy is risking: the F-16s at Aviano, the Airborne Brigade in Vicenza, the massive staging hub at Sigonella, the 6th Fleet down in Naples. These are all Italian-owned bases. The Americans, they're just tenants. But that tenant presence is the exact air cover and naval spine that has kept Italian shipping lanes safe for literally 75 years.
And honestly, that shield is needed right now more than ever. Italy's own defense minister, Guido Crosetto, gave this stark warning: Russian ships and submarines are no longer 1,000 kilometers away. They are 2 steps away. Because as Russian subs relocated from their bases in Syria to brand new moorings in Libya, which is right on Italy's southern flank, by the way, Italy's diplomatic rift with the U.S. started to look like, frankly, geopolitical malpractice. Moving on to Section 4, Italy's defense deficit, papering over gaps. This brings us to a really harsh domestic reality. Can Italy actually defend its own peninsula if the Americans pack up and leave? Well, the financial disparity is brutal. Italy fell drastically short of the 2% NATO defense spending target in 2024, hitting just 1.49%. Even the Italian defense minister admitted that catching up to NATO benchmarks is going to take years. The Italian army is reportedly starved for material, which leaves this massive, glaring gap between the threats they face from the south and the actual equipment they have to deter them.
Now, to eventually claim they hit that 2% line, Rome leaned heavily on what we'll call recategorized defense spending. Basically, they mathematically reached the NATO line only by tossing things like military pensions, tax police outlays, and Coast Guard expenditures into the defense funding bucket. Economists are straight up calling this accounting trickery politically convenient. And it's happening while domestic politicians, like Maloney's own deputy prime minister, are loudly demanding that state funds go to hospitals instead of weapons.
Section 5. The broader NATO shift. Moving east. If the Pentagon does pull these 12,000-plus troops out of the Mediterranean because of these deficits and clashes, we have to ask, where are they going next?
First off, we should note that Italy isn't alone in the hot seat. Both Italy and Spain are facing the exact same posture of eumetric, because both nations actively hindered American operations during an active conflict. But while Rome denied landing rights and suspended agreements, Madrid went even further. They closed their airspace to U.S. aircraft, denied the use of a naval base near Cadiz, and publicly called the Iran war illegal. The source notes this actually sparked internal U.S. discussions about suspending Spain from NATO altogether.
So, if the U.S. pulls out of the South, who wins? Well, the proposed beneficiaries of this troop realignment are Warsaw, Riga, and Bucharest. According to U.S. defense lawmakers pushing to keep forces in Europe, the absolute worst-case scenario for Rome is that the American shield simply packs up and resurfaces in Eastern European nations. Why? Because those nations are actually investing heavily in hosting them, and they align closely with Washington's strategic goals.
Section 6. The ticking clock, a 10-day window. We've reached the critical juncture of this explainer. The strategic clock is rapidly running out for the Italian government.
Let's look at the menu of options on the table. Prime Minister Maloney faces an incredibly tight window, and honestly, none of the options are easy. Step 1. Open a quiet channel to Washington. The problem? Sources say she hasn't actually spoken to the U.S. president in weeks. Step 2. Accelerate military spending. But she doesn't have the parliamentary support or the economic room for that, especially with a highly skeptical electorate. Step 3. Lean on EU partners. But wait, those same partners have relied on the exact same U.S. security blanket for decades? Which leaves Step 4. Do nothing and literally watch the troops leave.
And let's be clear, the threat of those troops leaving is not a bluff. The source emphasizes a direct quote from the U.S. president. The cuts will go a lot further. The era of European leaders lecturing American presidents on morality while simultaneously relying on American troops for their basic security, that era is decisively over. The rules of the alliance are being rewritten in real time.
Which leaves us with a massive, pressing question. As Russian assets literally sit in watch from Libyan ports just across the water, what exactly is Italy's plan when the southern shield of American security finally boards a plane home? Will Rome pivot in time, or are we about to witness the complete unwinding of NATO's southern anchor? It is a geopolitical tectonic shift happening right before our eyes, and the next few days will likely determine the security map of Europe for decades to come.